for joining me here at Mississauga's weekly update. I'm joined today by my fellow councillors, Councillor from Ward 2, Alvin Tedjo, Councillor from Ward 6, Joe Hornick, and Councillor from Ward 7, Deepika Demirla. And our CAO, Sherry Lichterman, is available for questions as well. I wanted to take the opportunity, as your mayor, to address the rumors that have been swirling around over the media the past few days, namely that the province is considering walking back their decision to make Mississauga independent and dissolve the region of Peel. It goes without saying, if this is truly the direction the province is headed in, I'm deeply disappointed and frankly angry for the wasted time and resources. But if there's something the Premier and I can agree upon, that's that we need to deliver for taxpayers, and local government must be efficient and effective. Walking back the Hazel-McCallion Act would be a tough one for the Premier and our local MPPs to explain to Mississauga residents and future generations who will have to continue to bear the burden of sending their property tax dollars to other municipalities and a secondary level of government. It will also be a difficult one to document in our history books. I want to be clear. Independence is about reaching a deal that's fair and equitable for all of our taxpayers. Dissolving Peel Region and eliminating an additional layer of government will allow all of us, Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon, to become more efficient, reduce confusion amongst residents, streamline the delivery of services, and ultimately save residents and businesses time and money. We're confident it's the right thing to do. Yet, as of late, we've been hearing Mayor Patrick Brown spout unfounded and highly questionable claims that dissolution could cost taxpayers an extra $1.3 billion over 10 years. Where did he get these numbers from exactly? Nobody, not the media, government, or the public, have seen and independently reviewed this updated report. The first Deloitte report in 2019 was rightly dismissed by Peel Council because of dubious methodology, false and frankly outrageous assumptions. It was created to justify the existence of the region of Peel. It was not independent, and it did not look at different scenarios, amalgamation, separation, or status quo, which a different report, the EY report, did look at. Updating the Deloitte report on the same foundations will only produce the same skewed results. The numbers couldn't be validated then, and they can't be validated today. And while Mayor Brown may revel in the status quo, I have a vision for Mississauga and cities across this great province, and it starts with each municipality having control over their own destinies and their taxpayers funding their own priorities. I ask, why is Mayor Brown so afraid to lead an independent Brampton, a city he claims is one of the fastest growing that will soon be home to over 1 million people? A city that managed for 4 years of zero tax increases at the city and was able to pass a tax rate lower than Mississauga's this year. How did he achieve this? As mayor, I hope it wasn't at the expense of his reserves or by not investing in his long-term capital plan. Is he not ready to lead an independent city? Does he not have a vision? To Mayor Brown, it's never too late to do the right thing by releasing your report so residents and the media can scrutinize your claims directly. I also ask the Premier and the Minister to not make any rash decisions based on faulty numbers and a report that no one has seen. Taxpayers expect us to make transparent, evidence-based decisions. That's how we govern here in Mississauga, and that's what our taxpayers and the public elected us to do. It's how the Hazel-McCallion ran things here. She did her homework and made decisions based on evidence. As someone who considers Hazel a mentor, I'd expect the Premier to do the same. I ask that the province to provide clarity as soon as possible. The legislature is now taking a long break until February, but the Hazel-McCallion Act remains in full force and effect today. We need certainty for the thousands of staff at the Region of Peel, including Peel Police and paramedics, who are sitting at the edge of their seats. They deserve answers, and they deserve them immediately, as do our residents. For those listening in, my message is clear. It's business as usual at the City of Mississauga and the Region of Peel, and services will continue uninterrupted. In the meantime, I ask that the good work of the Transition Board continue. It's a board appointed by the province, by the Premier himself, to undertake this important work, a board that has a clear mandate from this government to dissolve the Region of Peel and ensure that all 3 cities are treated fairly, and that they are left in a healthy, sustainable financial position that allows them to stand on their own 2 feet. I know they're committed to this and are working on their first major report back to the province. I ask that their report be expedited so that it can be released to the public. Mississauga wants to continue to work with the Transition Board and the province to continue this process and do what's best for Mississauga, for Brampton, and for Caledon, some of Ontario's fastest growing cities. And we want to work with the province to help them deliver on their goal of building 1.5 million homes, but the status quo hinders our ability in achieving this. The reality is right now that we're not in the driver's seat. What happens next is up to the Premier. I ask that he do the right thing, not only for taxpayers, but for Hazel-McCallion and for all the staff and residents who are living in uncertainty. He owes it to Mississauga residents, businesses, and taxpayers. And now, along with my council colleagues and my Chief Administrative Officer, Sherry Lichterman, we will take questions on this topic.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. As the Mayor said, we're here to have a conversation about city priorities and the dissolution of the Region of Peel and Mississauga's independence. We'd ask that you keep the questions related to that. Any questions related to the Mayor's role as the Ontario Liberal Party leader should be directed to the party. We are going to take questions from both in the room as well as online, as we are hybrid today. And so our first question is going to Steve Cornwell from the Mississauga News. Steve, what's your question?
Sure, Crombie. I was just wondering, it seemed to be in the reporting of this, one of the explanations to why Premier Ford suggested that, or why Premier Ford is perhaps pushing for Mississauga and separate from Peel was perhaps a personal agreement he made with Hazel. Is there a sense in your view now that this could be a personal issue for you? Why potentially could be making?
You know, I've said this before, Steve, that the Premier and I disagree on a lot of things, but where we do agree is to cut red tape, eliminate duplication, eliminate bureaucracy, and cut waste. What we want is efficiency and effectiveness in government, and that's what the Hazel-McCallion Act does. I'm not going to speak about any commitments he may have made to our former mayor, but I think we both know the reality of that.
Do you have a follow-up, Steve?
Yeah, and just on the note of kind of the work that's already been happening here,
Yeah.
my understanding is that obviously the Act will still be in place. There's no movement to kind of pull the Act from the legislature, even if the announcement does come this week, as has been rumored. Does work continue over the next month and a bit, and can you give us a sense of kind of what the city's been doing to prepare for this?
And while our city managers, Sherry Lichterman, comes to the podium, which I'm going to ask her to do, I'm going to start responding by saying that this is a hand-picked committee, a transition board that the Premier and the government picked themselves. We had nothing to do with the makeup of the transition board, but they are highly respected and highly qualified individuals that we have a lot of confidence in to move this process forward. Our city manager and officials have been meeting with them regularly, as have the city officials of Brampton and Caledon, and in fact, they meet as a group as well. Sherry, would you like to fill us in on the process, please?
Thank you, Mayor Crombie. Yes, so for the last couple of months, we have been having 2 full days of meetings with the transition board, broken out by service into working groups, working through how services will be delivered post-dissolution, and it's been a very cooperative process. At the table, we've had the CAOs and leadership teams from Brampton, Mississauga, and Caledon, as well as representatives from the region of Peel providing information, and again, the transition board. So the process has been going well. There's been no report out from the transition board, and the messaging that's coming out about a report on financials is not related to this process and has not been vetted by anyone involved directly in the process.
Thank you for the question. We next have Ahmad from Polly Corner. Ahmad?
Switch, just switch. Yep. Yeah, of course.
We've been hearing for months that police departments rumored that the government will backtrack on. I wonder why now? Do your political aspirations or your move to provincial politics cost?
I hope that that wouldn't be true. I hope the Premier has the right, he had the right instincts and he wanted to do the right thing, and I hope that he will continue to do the right thing. The third and fourth largest city deserve to control our own destinies and stand on our own 2 feet. And provisions have been made for the town of Caledon, the municipality, so that it can also stand on its own 2 feet. I wonder if Sherry might want to speak to some of those changes that are being proposed through the uninterrupted delivery of some of our services as the transition board is looking at.
Thank you, Mayor Crombie. As I mentioned, the teams are working together to look at various models for how we deliver the services post-dissolution, and there are different models to look at. Obviously, each city can deliver its own service, but with a smaller community like Caledon, it's possible that they would have service agreements with neighboring municipalities. So the work was really just beginning in earnest. There are still a lot of options to work through, but we were very much confident that each city was going to be able to come up with the model that works for them, and that we would all work collaboratively to ensure financial sustainability for all 3 municipalities involved.
Thank you, Sherry. Ahmad, do you have a follow-up?
Just let me just, I'll give him a follow-up, but I just wanted to say that there are 170 single-tier cities, Ahmad, including Windsor, London, Kingston, even Little Dryden, that can manage to stand on their own 2 feet. But somehow the third and the fourth largest city are connected, and that umbilical cord must be cut, and we must be able to stand on our own 2 feet and control our own destinies going forward.
Mayor Crombie, what we've heard is that the transition board has been concerned by the cost that it will cause for taxpayers, and we've heard also from unions, from the paramedics, they're also concerned about the effect of services. You spoke a bit about how CMPs are going to have trouble explaining this to residents.
Right.
But if what the province is going to tell residents tomorrow is that the cost of this dissolution is
Right.
going to be more expensive for them, do they really have a tough time explaining?
Ahmed, that was a false headline. The transition board has not spoken out on any phantom reports that have been produced by Mayor Brown, which inaccurately cited 1.3 million increase of taxpayer dollars. These numbers are false and they are misleading, and the transition board has not made comment on them because they're speculative. No one has seen this report, and it's based on false premises. When the Deloitte report was first analyzed, when it was first written, it was done so to justify the ongoing existence of the region of Peel, and it made some, and I'm going to have Sherry to come here and speak about some of the false assumptions that it was made. So updating that report only skews the numbers in the negative even more. You know, what you need to do is look at all 3 assumptions and how all 3 municipalities will be better off in the long run. Sherry, would you like to speak to some of those false assumptions that were made in the initial report?
Sure. The original Deloitte report assumed that there would be 2 separate police forces, that there would be a payout of all contracts that the region had entered into, that all employees would be severed and receive severance pay, union agreements would be escalated to the highest cost. It's well documented that a lot of the assumptions that were made in the Deloitte report were simply not realistic. And of course now, several years later, as we're actually at the table working through some of these details, we can see that most of those assumptions are completely inaccurate. And so really, we should step away from past reports because the work is being done right now, and we can do modeling based on the current assumptions that these working groups are doing with the transition board. And at this time, the modeling isn't complete. So Mississauga would very much like to see that modeling worked through and a report out from the transition board before any decisions are made on the financial impacts.
Thank you. Our next questions will come.
Just one more. I just want to say that I want to speak to some of our first responders because, of course, they're at the edge of their seats, as I had mentioned, whether they're paramedics or Peel Regional Police. Of course, they play a life-saving role, and we are committed to ensuring that there is no disruption in service to the community as a result of this process. These are very critical jobs, and we need a plan in place to retain our paramedics and to build strong talent and a strong talent pipeline for the future. We know that our paramedics need to grow by nearly 50% by 2030, and we are making an investment through this year's budget to address the increase in their call volumes. And like many other of the critical services provided by the region, I know that this is something that the Transition Board is looking closely at, and until such time as there is an announcement by the province, this work will and must continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Crombie. Our next questions will come online.
Mayor Crombie, your first online question comes from Mirna Jukic with CBC Radio Canada. Mirna, please go ahead.
Yes, hi. Thanks for taking my question. Mayor Crombie, you point to the faults in Mayor Brown's numbers and his assumption. I'm wondering if you yourself have any data, any evidence that shows that it would indeed be more cost effective to go through with the dissolution.
In fact, the other reports show there would be a savings. There would be some initial costs, but after a decade, there would be savings. But this is the very work that we need the Transition Board to continue to do. And after that work is complete, then we can make a final decision. But now, based on phantom reports that no one has seen, based on false assumptions and false premises, it should not be considered as part of the analysis.
Mirna, follow up?
Yes, and if there is a final report, some conclusion from either the Transition Board or the province that shows that indeed it would be more cost effective to stay together, would you back down? Would you
Mirna, anecdotally, how could 3 municipalities funding a second level of government be more cost effective? Just look at the duplication in planning, in roads, in legal, in administration, in IT, in HR, in transportation, in works, the duplication of the number of departments. And I know, Councillor DeMerla, you commented on some duplication that you identified that is coming forward tomorrow if you want to speak to it. The amount of duplication, the number of jobs that are unnecessary, there alone speaks to cost savings that can be realized. I'm going to let Councillor DeMerla speak to some of the duplication she was seeing in our very budget consultation.
Thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity. Yes, I mean, there's duplication across the board, but let me just share one example that's going to take place tomorrow. Earlier in November, the City of Mississauga, our planners spent their time, their money, and their intellect, I guess, to decide whether 3 employment sites in Mississauga should be kept in the employment area or should they be removed. Now, this decision really should be for Mississauga to make because this is entirely in the City of Mississauga, but no. After it came to the City of Mississauga and our council voted on it, and we agreed to remove some, and we said some it's not appropriate. Well, now it's coming to the region of Peel again to relitigate. I have 2 questions. What is the value addition of another set of planners at the region of Peel rewriting the same report, incorporating things that the City of Mississauga has already laid out and just rehashing that? And then what is the value of a councillor in Caledon who has never even visited these employment sites trying to weigh in on this? Clearly duplication and ineffective decision making. Let me give you another example. For example, the roads. Some of our roads in Mississauga are owned by the region of Peel, and some of them are by Mississauga. The problem is, take an example, snow plowing. So a snow plower has to come all the way down to Mississauga from the region of Peel to plow 3 or 4 roads parallelly. The City of Mississauga snow plows are plowing parallel streets. would it not save us all money if, if, for instance, Mavis is being plowed by the city of Mississauga, that Cartha and Dixie are also plowed by the city of Mississauga, instead of bringing snow plows all the way for Cartha and Dixie, which are regional roads? Just some examples. I mean, there's so much waste.
Great, thank you. Councillor Hornick? Councillor Hornick would like to
Yeah,
share
I
an
mean,
example.
I would just point out on roads too, the coordination of traffic lights, the standards on things like sidewalks. I know these are very niche things, but they're the things that when you drive through the city, you can quickly see. If you drive down a regional road, you can awfully quickly point it out because of a lack of trees. The standard in Mississauga is to have a more treed boulevard, and the Region of Peel, it's not. It's a small thing, but like when we have to coordinate traffic flow, when we have to coordinate our bus schedules and all these kinds of things, it's another layer of government that we have to go and ask permission for how to do things or have to coordinate. So I'm excited about the idea of a Mississauga that's independent and able to, manage its own affairs.
Right. Sure. Okay. Thank you. Next question or follow-up, please.
Our next question comes from City TV and Cynthia, my apologies. The next question comes from the Toronto Star and Noor Javid. Noor, please go ahead.
So today I spoke to several people, several union reps for Peel Region employees, and there seems to be a lot of the employees are happy with this potential reversal. I spoke to Mayor Groves, who also was kind of hadn't really voiced her opinion, but now she's also expressed kind of happiness with the idea that there could be a reversal. So there seems to be like a large number of people who are potentially happy with this decision. Because they are concerned that services won't continue for them. They're worried about their jobs, they're worried about future services. So what do you say to those people who have looked at the potential or what could be and are worried?
Noor, it's an excellent question, and I know that change is difficult, and we have been doing this now for 50 years. And for 50 years, Mississauga has been funding putting investment money, our tax dollars, into the Region of Peel at the rate of 70%. So I understand how our employees are feeling insecure because they're facing uncertainty because change is difficult. So this is why we're asking for this process to continue, to rip the Band-Aid off the scab, let the transition work do its work. They have a mandate to complete it quickly and be in place by January 1st, 2025, and we ask that work continue. Services will continue uninterrupted, and we are looking for the right scenarios. I don't know if Sherry wants to comment here based on discussions with transition boards on service agencies. But obviously change is difficult, and when people are used to doing things one way, no matter how ineffective, inefficient, or not cost-effective they are, then of course they want things to remain the way they are. But there will be cost savings. There will be more efficiencies and less duplication. We'll cut red tape and we'll eliminate waste, and those are all very good goals.
Follow-up question?
Yeah, I do. So one of the things I've heard is that the transition board, when they finish the report, it won't be made public, and even council may not see it. It's just going to go to the province, and the province will then decide, as they did the last time with this kind of regional.
Sealing and pen.
Sorry?
There was another report that wasn't released. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like the previous time when they did the regional review, but this is different. But so that no one will ever see this report, essentially, and the outcomes of it. So let's say, what if they say, okay, you know what, we're not going to do this complete dissolution, but we're taking all these points around efficiencies and that kind of you guys are speaking to. Would that be something that Mississauga would be?
We would accept any small step that creates greater efficiencies, of course, reduces red tape and eliminates duplication. But there's a greater good here at play as well, Noor. And that is controlling our own destiny and being an independent city and having those departments that are currently at the Region of Peel sitting around one council chamber, so that, as Councillor Demerla has said, councillors in Caledon and Brampton aren't weighing in on decisions that solely affect Mississauga, that we make decisions about our own municipality, invest our tax dollars into our municipality rather than fund a secondary level of government. So that is pretty key and critical to us, as well as keeping our identity, which is quite different and quite distinct from that of Brampton and that of Caledon.
That concludes all of our online questions. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today for this very important discussion.
Thank you very much, Mayor Crombie. That concludes today's press conference. Thanks, everybody, for attending.